Hello, everyone. I'm JeanClaude BeyondMystic, and welcome to part 2 of this Confessions of an Illuminati with Leo Zagami. Of course, you can find his work at leozagami.com on his website and also on YouTube at the Leo Zagami Show. Let's give him a welcome back to the show, Mr. Zagami. Benvenido.
Thank you very much for having me back on, and I will try to deliver my usual book in a very synthetic form, which is always a challenge.
Yes, there's a lot of data in there. And folks, if you're just joining us now, this is part 2 of our book review series. And 2 weeks ago, let me bring it up, we went through this voluminous volume 5, and we had quite a bit to talk about in that show. So we tried our best to condense it and to give you, as Leo is saying here, a very synthetic view of the goodies that are inside this literature for you. So tonight, we're excited to talk about Volume 4. And so the reason we're changing the sequence of the books here a little bit is to help you, the audience, map that with what's actually happening and transpiring now in our realm. So Leo suggested that we start with 5, go back to 4, and then we'll end with number 6, of course, the 666, the AI, and potentially how that ties in to the health issues that are going on around the world and the reprogramming maybe of our DNA. So that'll be for the next episode. So welcome everybody to this live show. If we have time tonight, we're going to try to take a few questions from the audience. Last week, we ran out of time. There were so many things we wanted to discuss. And so tonight, we'll try to incorporate some of your questions throughout the show. So Leo, without further ado, let's dive into this volume 4 here and show the audience why maybe they should get a read on this and understand a little bit more from the Illuminati perspective, why they do the things that they're doing right now.
Well, this book was, of course, published before of the end of the Trump era. It was published in at the end of 2019, though, in a situation in which I was already seeing myself certain changes, and obviously I was also seeing the uncertainty in what was the challenge because of the possible games that were played in this New World Order scenario, which is pushing, of course, their own agenda, which is a liberal agenda, needs, of course, a liberal progressive style president, which is not even himself that liberal progressive. He's just a puppet in the hands of those forces who are manipulating him. And those forces are both religious forces. We are talking now about the second president in the history of the United States who is Catholic, but it really makes a difference when the basic subject of this book, as you can see from the cover, is really the Jesuit order and this confession room of the Jesuit order. In the cover, me inside of it, it's all very symbolic. Of course, the symbol of the Jesuits, which is showing that they are part of this invisible force that is manipulating society. So this book wants to describe what's happening behind the scenes. And already, I said, we are going either towards a civil war or either we are going towards a renaissance, depending on who is going to win the elections and how we're going to play, our decisions in the coming years, if we're going to actually give in this satanic reality that was built for us by the Jesuits. And already in this book, imagine, JeanClaude, I already talked about Bill Gates going to the Vatican to discuss synthetic food together with Melinda, of course. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it was November 2019. So we were really still not knowing anything about the upcoming pandemic, though it was, of course, already spreading. And now, as you can see from 3 days ago, he's actually saying that he's gonna eat more synthetic meat and fly less to fight climate change, which we know is complete hypocrisy, because we know that these people are show-offs, and so often they lie. But this visit that there was, and what I did in this book, I also talked about my own experience with the movie Soil and Green, how I saw that movie when I was very young, how I was scared by that movie, how I re-encountered that movie in Norway during my stay in Norway, in Oslo, and the importance of me understanding the contemporaneity, the fact that in Italy this film was actually entitled Sopravvissuti 2022, Survivors 2022. So if you go and take the Italian title now and you show it to our viewers, they will understand that actually it's almost prophetic. And another of the subject that, of course, is touched in Soil and Green is euthanasia. In this book, I also talk about how the Jesuits have encouraged actively in this country, in the US, the possibility of assisted suicide, euthanasia. And so I really projected this invisible word to most people because they simply ignore who is shaping your heads of state, your bankers, your militaries, your intelligence agencies. Well, it's always the same people. It's the Jesuit order of the Vatican, is the Company of Jesus that was founded by Ignazio Loyola. So then in this book, first of all, I start with the invisible forces, which are the archons,
right, in
the at times Gnostic vision, no, and other alien entities in this end time scenario. What was Gurdjieff doing, and who was Gurdjieff? Because a lot of New Agers tend to think Gurdjieff is such a nice guy, but then they maybe don't know certain things about him, certain links also to the Jesuits, even in his own philosophy and way he was working things to create, of course, a very strict discipline and everything else. But you have to understand that in my vision here in this book, I wanted to first of all describe what these demonic forces were. So I used the phrase Onoarno. It's very complicated to spell. I tell you, it's a bit of a T, a Z, an A, an R, an O, an H, an A, an R, an N, and an O. It's Svnorno, and it's this very complicated word that comes out of George Ivanovich Gurdjieff's tradition. And maybe for those who don't know who Gurdjieff was, let's say that he was a great thinker, a great initiate. He claimed to have had some kind of connection with some kind of ancient Sufi-like initiatory order, and he himself was connected, though, to a line of thought that was quite revolutionary. And so he talks about this, but he was also very inspirational to a lot of Freemasons. He's also been very influential within the New Age movement in a way. In this book called The Herald of the Coming of God, of the Coming Good, he basically talks about this word, which means an idea particularly dear to Freemasons. Meaning that this Zuanarno, sorry, but it's really a very difficult word to spell, arises among people, which leads to the destruction of anyone who tries to help humanity. It's a little bit like a sort of syndrome of the cave, going back to the discussion, of course, that is represented, that is written about by Plato, and that sees as a character Socrates in the cave. It's a little bit
like the allegory of the cave, you mean?
Yes, the allegory of the cave. Yeah. So Zuano is a similar kind of concept, it's basically, though, the energy itself that pushes those people who try to bring eventually the people out of the cave. So it's like the specific force, demonic force, that keeps humanity from evolving, no?
Right.
So Gurdjieff was, of course, inspired by the theosophical milieu, and also was close to the Jesuits. Like I said, he was close to the Jesuits and was close to even to Joseph Stalin. And this is a point that not many people know about. So I also discuss this. In psychological terms, though, I also talk about the fact that Sarno is a collective unconscious force whose first instinct is to oppose any counter force that is attempting to wake people up, make them aware of the prison planet we're living on. Now, Gnostics are, of course, a mystical branch of Christianity that arose a couple of centuries after the arrival of Christ. So at times we seem to give too much credit for what Gnosticism really was. But at the same time, some elements in Gnosticism are important because they're always part of school of thoughts of the very early Christians. Though we know that the conflict in the end generated a complete rejection of the Gnostic thinking by traditional Christians, mostly because there is a complete different take about what God wants and what God stands for and what God is in itself, no? But the concept, though, of the guardians, the concept of the archons, it's a concept that the Gnostic actually discussed, and they seem to be the classic legion of Satan, that together with the Prince of Darkness is kind of oppressing humanity, no? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to describe really all the rebellion in heaven in relation also with the book of Revelation, with what is happening in the end times, with the term archon referring to the servant of the demiurge in the Gnostic concept, the evil creator God. And so these archons we can describe commonly, if we want to say it in matrixes terms, as sort of Mr. Smith of the situation in the Matrix film, of course, JeanClaude. So we are now, in my book, trying to also make people understand how the real Jesus is actually trying to survive. The real idea of Jesus through all this distortion that is obvious. But also, I talked about the trial that conduced Jesus himself in front of Pontius Pilate, and then we see the evil forces that are actually described by Gurdjieff, this famous Zuarno. Well, it's actually the same forces that are there pushing the masses to say we prefer a criminal or somebody that to Jesus. We prefer Barabbas, we prefer somebody else. We want to save somebody else rather than Jesus, who, of course, regardless of the fact that is, of course, the manifestation, the child of God, if you want to say the ultimate representation of a prophet on earth, he had to go himself against this force. So I wanted to explain what this force was. I wanted to also give some references that make people understand how these archontic forces, in a way, were unleashed even more from the darkest side since the advent of Aleister Crowley's work, especially in the moment in which Crowley died. It's like Pandora's box opened up.
Right.
Instead of the actual guy dying and disappearing in oblivion, or being remembered in a kind of nostalgic or most of all celebrational way, like happens with other thinkers, his work seemed to instead have evoked entities, events, openings of extra-dimensional gates that were further widened by his followers. And so I wanted to explain in ancient Egypt. Now we had only recently, and you can go and pick up this, because we all know that in the caves near the Dead Sea, we have had a new discovery after so many decades. But in my book here, first of all, I wanted to discuss what was found in 1945 in Nag Hammadi in Egypt. I wanted to unveil certain elements that were hidden then by the Vatican to this day. There is been also researches done in this direction by other very prepared writers and researchers. I remember many years ago, I remember reading a book by Michael Bagent and Richard Lane, that those guys, that was very interesting and very critical about how the Vatican intervened immediately after this discovery to just have their control over what was discovered.
Right.
So if these texts were not so important or related to Jesus, why did the Vatican go through such
measures?
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
In my book, I try to explain all this connection. I try to make people understand that this Crowley's working of the Notian Aethers in 1909 in the desert of North Africa, they themselves represented a danger for humanity, but it was also part of, unfortunately, what was meant to happen to open this age that we consider to be the apocalypse. So the entire Enochian apocalypse working of Crowley is described in my work. And I try to, at the same time, make people realize all the connections, even the connections that might not seem immediately, like with the Nazi Holocaust, or the fact that we are now visioning writings that are a danger for the church in a way. But at the same time, they are appearing now because this is the moment in which the full horror of Revelation has been realized upon the stage of the world. So also these new parchments that were found recently in this cave a week, 10 days ago, with this old the 7,000, I think, 6,000-year-old girl that was preserved under two rocks. There was also a 12,000-year-old manufact, like a chest, built up 12,000 years old. But this is a manufact of extremely old. But aside from this, then there is those passages of the Bible, Old Testament, of course. One, actually, I don't even think it's only probably in the Jewish Bible version. But I mean, I think it's passages by Zechariah, I think. There is definitely an invitation for people to do good in these passages. I find themselves, I now don't remember or have them in front of me. If you want to put them in front of us or read them, maybe we can share them with our viewers. I think that the fact that we are literally living all this at this specific time is because there is a reason. And so, as you can see, fragments of these parchments, archaeology in this 60 years, yes, absolutely. And I tell you, the importance of these fragments and what they say will be discussed for many years ahead, because it seems like it's one of the most important discovery, but it's also very significant discovery at this moment of time. So the fact that even before this discovery, I was already discussing certain things on my book, is because then we have something else that I included in all this, the coming, of course, of the Antichrist, and also the place where it was found. Now it's called Cave of Horrors. So, I mean, it kind of like brings you into the into the creepy spirit of our era, especially when you have, for example, the law in Israel that now wants people with bracelets going around and all kinds of restriction limitations that have never been seen. And so we have seen the Jewish community trying to call in advance the Messiah to expose himself. And then we have instead in my book the actual extractions that have been prepared by the Illuminati by a guy like Eliphas Levi, who used to be himself a monk of some kind, an abbot even, I don't know, but he was definitely a monastic figure. Before then, he abandoned, defrocked, and became a socialist and an occultist of great importance. And he's considered very important in the pseudo-religion of Aleister Crowley. Crowley considered himself to be a reincarnation of this figure.
Mm-hmm.
So what did yes, there you are, of course, showing all the things that were found, and of course very interesting. But I would say that going back to where we are now, my book now starts like this, and at that point in chapter 2 goes into the descending into the abyss of the Jesuit world, explaining also, though.
I hold you there for a second, Leo.
Yes.
Before we get into chapter 2, I just wanted to bring this up for the audience because, of course, you said this name is very hard to pronounce, and I found it here in the book, and I brought it online to people here. So can you pronounce this again here? And I'm going to bring that in the chat.
Snoharno. It's not an easy one. Probably somebody from the Caucasian region will probably know how to pronounce it much better than me. I think maybe you have to pronounce it more with a Russian kind of.
Sovarno. Okay. And so here, in reference to your book, Gurdjieff describes that there are these forces, archonic or whatever you want to call them, that are preventing humanity from basically waking up from this allegory or the cave allegory in Plato. And what I like here too, you linked in, here we're talking about it being coined by King Solomon, but you went back here in history and you talked about John Dee. So that brings the whole aspect of, the James Bond, the CIA.
I mean, I already brought John Dee in a very detailed manner in volume 1, because he's somebody that I already brought into my confession series from an early stage, because it's so important, like you said,
right?
When I discussed the very foundation of the intelligence world. And so I had to mention it. But in this case, it's connected to the apocalypse that really is manifesting after their Enochian codes between, it's John Dee and Kelly, his medium, and then Crowley.
Right. And
Crowley.
Then, let me bring this back up. And this guy here from the CIA.
Of course. Yes. And
right.
No, but what I want to say is that Crowley was completing a job in the occult world, but at the same time, we always see this overlaps of circumstances between the occult and the intelligence world. Mm-hmm. Now, people would say it happens often, or is it just a pure coincidence that at times the intelligence world mingles into occult affair? No, unfortunately, and I must say unfortunately, JeanClaude and I had much experience in this, and I continue to have to this day, there is an interconnection between the intelligence world and the occult that is simply not, you can't divide them. They simply go along with each other.
Right.
At times, even myself, I'm like, asking myself, how is it possible that in 2021 or we are with the internet in a modern age, everything is technologically connected now, and everybody is really relying mostly on the material realm because they think that this is the basic realm of existence which we have to work with. Right. And these guys, the paranormal and these things like sideshows. But in reality then, when you go into the intelligence world in groups like Shin Bet, Mossad, the CIA, NSA, you always find this recurring connection, infiltration. I think that Crowley once described it in a very good way, and I think that in my books I've always managed to take him as an example because he did an excellent job, maybe in his position, which is the position of evil, to embrace complete evil and go to the maximum. But at the same time, he was working under Her Majesty's Secret Service. He was working in contact with the German Secret Service. This German Secret Service itself, though, was connected with people like Theodor Heuss and the Illuminati, who were involved with the very foundation of the OTO, which then was taken over by Crowley. It's a world in which we constantly find people intermingling with each other because it gives the opportunity to cover up things. Mm-hmm. You can, listen, it's very easy to give you an explanation also because I've written about it in my book. Volume 4 is very important and we are discussing it today, so I want to continue discussing it, but definitely to understand even better Volume 4, we need to understand why these interconnections occur. And so I think that it's always been like that since the beginning of time. Things that are strange, magic, occult, that fear, they inspire in people fear. Mm-hmm. And so because they inspire fear, they are already, per se, they are already psychological warfare. And so they are already operating in the realm of psychological warfare. You are creating maybe a scenario. Maybe you can open, I don't know, a yoga gym as a cover-up, a new age crystal thing as a cover-up, but then in the evening you have a bunch of CIA operatives doing everything else.
Right.
And those CIA operatives might be members of prestigious Rosicrucian or Masonic or various orders, and these orders are used as a cover, because people, the language that is taught in secret society is so codified that it's the same language that you learn when you have to go into the intelligence world. I mean, you have to be cryptic. Mm-hmm. And nothing is more cryptic than a secret society that has a level of recognition, initiations, and things. So at the same time, you have, of course, the cover of things that at times people fear very much. Because I saw at times, I don't know, which doctor works for the CIA, the people will think about it more as a witch doctor than as a CIA operative, because they will be scared, sorry if I say that, shitless, of the kind of force that he might manifest. In reality, the guy might even be a fraud. He might even not have any connection to the spiritual world. Or he might have. And in that case, those kind of figures, they are the most dangerous, because those are the ones who work into the dark side of the Illuminati, who clearly know their position into the network of the Illuminati, but also into the network of the intelligence services, know that they can open up as at times double agents, at times triple agents, at times as quadruple agents. Why is all this? Because, like I explain in my books, in the end, their aim is the same. So they don't really care if they play many different games. Mm-hmm. So in my book, I discuss Jack Parsons. I discuss Jack Parsons' involvement in the OTO, Aleister Crowley, and I also discuss Area 51. I discuss many elements, even of my own personal experiences that have been rather recent, because I came to the US and I was able to myself have certain experiences going through sighting Area 51 in the middle of the night and arriving to the headquarters of somebody who is responsible for a magical order, who gets me in his house in Paramp, who happens to be also the place where we had one of the greatest radio personalities living for a very long time, so I mean, it's many things that we don't understand, but that are all interconnected. So I wanted to explain the elements linked to the Jesuit tradition in all this. I wanted to explain why the Jesuits have been interested in alchemy, how they were connected to alchemy, and what was actually alchemy standing for, and what is all this work that is done both in the geopolitical arena, but also in the new arena of exopolitics. Because then these UFOs, these creatures that have been invited into this dimension, interact with very powerful people. And so in this part of the book, then I show with the names certain figures, like, for example, Giulio Andreotti, who was a very, very influential Italian politician, and his relationship with a guy, very important guy in the Vatican called Ivan Cenci, and then another guy who was the guy who inspired Cenci to write this book, who is this consul at Perego, and Perego was a guy who claimed he actually was flying with these creatures in their ships. So, and this is a guy who used to be a Knight of the Vatican, a member of the actual ambassador, with an ambassadorial position, with part of the diplomatic corps. Is a serious guy. It's not somebody you can claim is a crazy guy. Right. But in this book, I show also the links with people like George Adamski. I show the links of George Adamski with the occult. I talk about the present stage of the Jesuits and their link to this. Sorry, it's not easy over to, but this like this. Maybe you can see Guy Cosolmagno, who is the present guy responsible of course, the astronomical sector of the Vatican. He's a Jesuit guy. Jay Cosolmagno is the guy who has also written a book. Would you like to baptize an extraterrestrial? I mean, it's like that's obvious what's happening, in the control of this information. Now we understand more and more once I put together all these names, that there is a complete connection between the Jesuit world, the secret society, the intelligence world. It goes in and out, and then of course this, which you have mentioned, which I of course then have show pictures, which is basically, what is it? Is Zachariah Sitchin connection with Corrado Balducci, with the Vatican, and with the testimony of what I said back in my 2000 I think it was 2007, 2008. I did an interview with Project Camelot back then, and it was very controversial, and people said, but you don't have any evidence. And that evidence instead was brought on camera when I convinced Gianmario Ferramonti, who used to know Zachariah Sitchin, to come in front of the cameras of Stephen Quayle with Timothy Alberino, and at that point admit in front of the cameras that what I said was true. And there was an exchange even of alien artifacts. So people at that time, it was now many years ago, we're talking about nearly 15 years ago, this interview was done, 314.
2008 here was posted by Harry. I just put the link for the audience there if you want to go see this.
Yeah, so it's like since 2008, people have been able to view this interview, but they kind of never had the confirmations of what I said. In this book, I wanted to bring the evidence, like I brought in front of the cameras of Stephen Quayle, which is a very known ufologist, who came to Rome, by the way, because if you want to do your work and you want to do real investigative journalism, what they did was to go to Mount Graham at the Lucifer telescope, and at the same time come to Rome. In Rome, I managed to actually get them in, and I had to really play a little kind of it was very borderline situation there, in the sense that we were bordering on doing something illegal, going inside the headquarters of the Jesuit order in Rome to film without permission.
Right.
But I managed by a couple of days before, I was capable of going there and establishing a direct link with the guy who was working there at the entrance, who was reading my books. And by kind of like, also there was an accident that happened in front of there. We had to call an ambulance right before the camera team arrived. So when they were going to actually sort out the guy who was brought away with the ambulance, we were capable of bringing the whole camera crew inside the Jesuit headquarters and film. It was a crazy story, man. But we did it. We did it. So the Unholy See is this the result of it, and I mention it here in my book. So as you can see, we are going through the book very much at a fast pace, because we are almost getting to halfway, but there is still, of course, a few points that I would like to give. There is the whole part that I deem as very important for this book regarding both Sirius, which is, of course, also a subject that I discuss in relation to Kenneth Grant, not to be confused with Kenneth Anger. And then I brought my readers to today's Jesuit world, beyond the demonic, what is happening in the world of technology already in connection with the Jesuits. But then also I went for the first time very much in detail in explaining the Sabbatean Frankists and what are the Sabbatean Frankists? What is this heresy within the Jewish world that started with Sabbatei Zevi, and then followed up with Jacob Frank, who said he was the reincarnation of Zevi, and that formed what are known as the Sabbatean Frankists. Now, this heresy, some other researchers have talked about it, like David Icke recently. Instead of talking about the usual Zionist thing, it was becoming a little bit repetitive, and it wasn't really describing accurately what was happening. I prefer much more talking about Sabbatean Frankists, because I know they are the real reasons why the Jewish world has been blamed for so many things. And in this book, for the first time, I show the connections, the secret connection with the Jesuits. The connection between the Jesuits, certain secret societies, certain figures of important figures, key figures of secret societies, like Svendeborg, Emanuel Svendeborg from Sweden, who himself was said to be the reincarnation of the founder of the Jesuits, who himself studied the first text that the Jesuits sent from Tibet, that they were brought to Europe. So all this is very much described in my book. The real role and the real truth regarding Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of modern Turkey, and the connection, of course, with the Sabbatean Frankists. And all because they are known in Turkey as the Dome. They're not like something, out of a conspiracy book. They actually there have kind of an ethnic group connected to this. What is the Dome or the Sabbatean Frankists? Most of them want to practice most sin possible to bring sooner the end times. So the more you sin, the more you do satanic things, the more you do sexual magic. And they were the people who first spread certain theories that eventually made it to Aleister Crowley, because Crowley was, of course, inspired by Pascal Randolph, but Max Theon and people who inspired Madame Blavatsky were instead people connected to the Sabbatean Frankists. So all this connection in detail, and the connection also with the Rothschild family and the Jesuits and the Vatican. Mm-hmm. Now, all this is described in my book. And so I'm very happy that I did it back then, because then people, when during the pandemic they saw Linda Rothschild and everybody arriving in the Vatican, they say, wow. So then what you were writing was accurate. It wasn't just pulled out of a magician's hat. No, it wasn't. And actually, what I try to do in this book is also to describe in detail the spiritual work of Sant'Ignazio Loyola, the birth of the Ignazio Loyola exercises, which are used to mold the ruling elite, and also Freemasonry, which itself takes the chamber of reflection in continental masonry from the cave in which Ignazio Loyola had his first experience, because this guy was basically an occultist. He had been arrested 5 times by the Inquisition before he founded the order. And here a photo of the current general of the Jesuits, Arturo Sosa, in this cave where such exercises were put together, and why they were put together, the function that they have. And basically, I talk also about the Emanuel Svendeborg connection with the Loyola, known also as the Buddha of the North. I explain certain things regarding reincarnation that were of interest for the Jesuits, who themselves wanted to achieve the mastery over the tracing of the reincarnated beings, and that was something that they studied for many years. Then I also go into other subjects later on in the book, and I touch the subject of Christian Freemasonry by showing also documents that are very rare. I show how the first lodges of Freemasonry were made, shaped like a cross, to symbolize that they were actually product of Christianity. Then I go into a more contemporary part of the book, in which I discuss Madonna. I discuss then the Antichrist, the red flag laws. That's very good that you're showing also the cave of Arturo, where Arturo Sosa went to pray, which is the cave where Ignazio Loyola started but it was also the cave in which Ignazio Loyola every now and then brought some young girls and hypnotized them and probably told them to do some very nasty things. Who knows? I mean, that's what he said.
Right.
So
a conversation for another book.
Yeah, I mean, he was very hypnotic. He was a very charismatic leader. I don't think he would have ever made it to shape an order that then went into the conquest of the East. And that is also another very important part of this book. This is the first book, I think, in the English language for a long time that gives you also an entrance into the Jesuit secret operations in the Far East, their connection with the Brahmin, with the Tibetan monks, with the Chinese Empire, and why they have been so close to China for so long. And this was, like I said, published, written before the coming of the pandemic. But still, China, central role, the fact that the Vatican since 2018 has followed this new thing of wanting to accept the patriotic church into the fold of the Catholic Church. This is unprecedented because most of those priests and bishops were nominated by the Communist Party, so they have really no legitimate line of succession from Jesus to Peter to...
Right.
It was from what? From Karl Marx to Mao Zedong to... So it's not really the traditional line of... So these are Satanists. And what the Pope has accepted is satanic. And unfortunately, the hypocrisy today is rampant, but they are also very strong. As I said when I started this book, the presentation of this book, the fact that now we have the second Catholic president in history makes it really difficult to go through certain reforms that are very important. In this book, I talk about Antifa's connections with Satanism.
Right.
And Antifa's connection with Satanism are very important. I also explain how we basically have been manipulated to stay very ignorant by secret societies that have infiltrated the best universities. And of course, I went into exposing for the first time the secret societies in Georgetown University, the Society of Stewards, the Second Society of Stewards, and also another new secret society that just recently happened to appear in Georgetown, which is the first secret society for the LGBTQ community within Georgetown. And I also describe how this is the playground, has been the playground of Nancy Pelosi and her husband, who is also a Bohemian club member. The other secret society, like I said, is called the Orb. The Orb is the first LGBT secret society in Georgetown University. But the secret society, which I talked about, the Stewards, is very interesting because the Stewards were actually founded by the Jesuits, co-founded with some students, but it was actually Jesuits who started the secret society in the very early 1900s. And so I wanted to go into these details, all the details regarding Georgetown, because Georgetown is a very powerful place. You know, you have the Clintons, you have the Pelosi's, you have people who really have shaped Americans' progressive and liberal politics in the last few decades. And then I also go into instead a much more in-depth research and expose of, as I said, the connection between Antifa and Satanism. Those are real connections. I actually show the photos of these connections. It's not like I made them up. There is a connections, and there is, after that, an exposition I make in this book about Blacksit, which became popular, Candace Owens' organization in a way, and then the connection, though, to that we all see between the Jesuits and the KKK that nobody wants to talk about. So how many of the African American community are going to read this book? I'm not sure, but it will definitely help them to understand certain things. The fact that the KKK was created by the Jesuit inspired faction of Freemasonry is as a political tool used by the Democrats to help the Democratic Party is quite incredible in itself. People think about the KKK as something that is Republican. That's not the case.
Right.
And then I also went into the exposition of the Dark Side of Scotland. This is Moloch that appeared, unfortunately, in Rome.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
And for the first few months was there. And when it was supposed to be removed, it was supposed to be removed in Easter, it wasn't removed. And the Pope didn't even go there to make his mass, because we know he limited himself from wanting to participate to anything public. He actually participated in a solo moment, which is completely antithetic also to what Catholic tradition used to be. I mean, they used to fight these sicknesses head on with the cross and with the belief that you can fight with the faith any kind of illness. Otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
So what's the point? So I explain a lot of this. I also go into this part of me who is Scottish, as you may know. And so I wanted to expose also certain links with Satanism in Scotland, which is very important, and that not many people know about, but it's very important because Alistair Crowley practiced the magic of in the Mage Party there in Boleskine House. The Boleskine House went on fire, then went on fire again, and in the end it was almost, but they wanted to create, there was people from the British intelligence who were actually involved actively in renting this place and wanting to create a sort of new age Mecca around it. And they might still do it. And then the involvement of Michael Aquino, who supposedly is now dead, but he basically, Michael Aquino, at one point managed to obtain a title in Scotland. And I show even him wearing the kilt and all his title and stuff. And he was the founder of the Temple of Set, as you know, the second satanic organization of relevance to be created. And so, and the connections that Michael Aquino had with the Jesuits are many. And with pedophilia rings that are very dangerous and that are also connected with the Jesuits. So after that, I go into the Pachamama and the Church of Ignatian spirituality and all the decadence of the modern post-Second Vatican Council and what the Pope, the recent Pope, Pope Francis, who is the first Jesuit Pope in history, is trying to do by corrupting the Church. And I also talk about the relevance in all this, the connection with the Theosophical Society, the way certain ideas were filtered from the Theosophical Society and ended up then becoming at the basis of modern Satanism. But then at the same time also, what's the point of this Pachamama? And so I also connect the Pachamama center of worship with Atlantis. So not many people know this. This is a research that connects Paul Lecour, the Prayer of Zion, Atlantis, and the Jesuits, and the fact that Lake Titicaca is for many the original place where considered by the Jesuits to be the mythical city of Atlantis. They do the rituals there. Still, there is ongoing rituals to this day done daily. And not many people know what goes on in Lake Titicaca, and the Temple of the Sun is basically based there. And we know that the Jesuits have this round sun around the in Oxinio with this sign thing, which represents the cross, but they also have this the sun. So this ancient pagan worship connected to Atlantis. And all these connections, of course, historical. I describe them very well. I don't want to spoil the whole book, though. But I think that we have managed today, in a way, to still give an idea to the people about the importance of this book, because people will be able to connect the Pachamama of recent fame with the fact that the center of the worship of the Pachamama is ancient Atlantis site, and that they still do ritual. I mean, it's not a coincidence. It's all part of the Illuminati. The Illuminati worship the sun as well as they worship the moon.
Right.
And that's it. You have studied, of course, this book. So you also read French. So I will invite you to definitely study the work of Paul Lecour. And you have so much stuff in the French language that is still not even available in the English language that is of interest that people should.
What was that name?
Paul Lecour.
Paul Lecour? Lecour?
Yes.
Paul Lecour.
And then I talk about the Chinese rights controversy that started with the Jesuits originating in China, when the Jesuits wanted to integrate part of wanted to honor Confucius in a ritual, and they wanted the Vatican to accept it as a norm. And the thing went for many papacies. I think 7 popes went until at the end they said no, that's it. But mostly they said no, that's it, because at one point in 1771 the Jesuits themselves were kicked out of the Vatican for a period. However, I also explain in detail in this book the link between the Order of the Asiatic Brethren, which is a form of the Illuminati connected to the Sabbatean Frankists, the link with the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, the link with Madame Blavatsky, Max Theon, all these links are very important, because then you will understand through the right interpretation of this book all the background of the invisible world that is then later on creating the physical world, that it reflects in the physical world. When we have volume 6.66 in front of us, then I will be able to go further with certain things that, of course, I don't want to start today, but I kind of start to mention. But in volume 4, then another thing that I mention is the prophecy, the last prophecy of an old Indian. And here we go into the understanding, of course, that there is a common denominator, and this prophecy, the Hopi prophecy of White Feather that was given, and how this prophecy relates to today, how and why it was given to a guy called David Young in 1958, who was, by the way, I think, a Christian preacher, so somebody who didn't necessarily have a pagan background, but he had a Christian, apocalyptic, evangelic background that might have, in a way, connected better with this discovery that there was something that was, in a way, connecting with what we are saying. We are living in the end times, and the Indians know about it. And so I wanted to include this prophecy after I myself visited the land of the Hopi, and because this David Young is said to be also a relative of mine. So I also included this element. And I think that we did a very synthetic but very strong exposition of what this book is without going, of course, we can't, it's impossible. The book is how many pages? It's still a book almost 400 pages. And in the end, I really give that important last words about what we are about to fight here. The enemies of humanity. Legion of Satan is increasingly dominating, the advent of the Antichrist, the reality of these end times, and the possibility that we might end up, of course, here in the US because of the clash that is stronger and stronger between two types and two different ways of viewing life. You see, when you are starting to go away from the very foundation of that Constitution, John Adams said it better. We are, I mean, this is a country. It's God-given rights. When you are taking these God-given rights, when you have basically abandoned the fact that this nation was founded by and for religious people, together with, of course, people that might not be religious, but it never occurred that those non-religious people will take over the show and start to persecute the Christians, because the Christians created this nation.
Right. So
I wanted to really make a point with that in the end of my book. So I hope that my exposition was clear.
Very clear. Thank you so much, Leo. And I'm going to bring up here your PayPal tip jar for everyone to see here. It's in the live chat now. And folks, there's a link also in the description box below. And of course, as Leo was just mentioning, more and more now, his information in his books and even his interviews 15 years ago are being vindicated. And Leo's been the victim of quite a bit of this financial warfare against truth tellers, and so he's been demonetized, he's been deleted on YouTube, part of the club here. So if you like this information and you want Leo to continue to provide some of this information so that you have a better understanding not just of the world around us, but the events that are currently unfolding, please do consider supporting Leo in his work here. So you can do so here with his PayPal, or you can do so also by buying the book. And if you look at the links in the description box below, you'll get to the shelf with all of the books, 1 through 6 here in the series of Confessions of Illuminati. And so Leo, we're about 50, or we're in. Do you have maybe a few minutes to take some questions for the audience as well?
Absolutely, no problem. It'd be a pleasure.
So folks, if you guys have any questions for Leo, please put them in high caps. It's easier for me to bring it up on the screen, and we'll try to get through as many as we can here, maybe in the next 15 or 20 minutes max here. So while we wait, Leo, for the audience here to populate, let me ask you the first one here. We had this news story earlier that you talked about, this parchment that was just found here. And I brought up this picture. Where was it? Mr. Balducci, this one here. Now, who do you think right now would be doing the continuation of the work of Sitchin and Balducci and maybe some of the Jesuits, looking at the information that's just been discovered maybe 6 or 10 days ago now, and how they would maybe try to massage that narrative back into what they were trying to perpetuate here for the last 50 or 60 years? Do you have an understanding of how that might be unfolding here in the months and years to come?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about what has been discovered, but if we go really into the reality of it, we don't really see anything that is so shocking like with the Nagamadi work that was first exposed, because that was the product of a school of thought that was kind of cutting edge in the Jewish world, and that, of course, was breaking from the traditional Jewish line of thought. Here we have instead some traditional Jewish texts that, of course, some people have said that the whole operation around this discovery might be a signal of some kind. One thing is for sure, there has been a clash between the Catholic Church and the Jewish authorities of Israel in Jerusalem because of a tunnel that has been apparently built between a church of the Catholic Church and some, they say, living quarters. But what instead is the rabbis are accusing the Catholic Church of wanting to dig under Jerusalem to rehash the DNA of King David and to produce their own Messiah, Antichrist, that of course will not be genuine, but will be accepted because he will have the blood of King David. It's very controversial what is happening at the moment, but from what I understand, the Jewish world will take no nonsense, but they are already ready for the possibility that the first Messiah that is presented to them might not be the one, because it might be the product of a Jesuit manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow, that's fascinating. Oh, that brings up a whole other show. I've interviewed a few guests on the second coming of Christ here lately, and that's fascinating to me, but I'll keep that for next. We have a couple coming in here, but I want to ask you this again. So, okay, so you brought up Georgetown University's, the connection there with Antifa, with Satanism, and of course, this gentleman here. This, of course, made the news a couple of years ago. People were it was bubbling up to the surface, what you had been talking about for a while here, all of these networks. I'm curious now, with the lull in the information, we had this, you call it a psyop in the last couple of years with the 17th letter of the alphabet, that these mass arrests were coming, and they were coming, but there's always delayed. What do you see maybe here happening in 2021?
I mean, I never really trusted so much people talking about mass arrests. I never really was on the. I think this whole QAnon mania of mass arrest has been completely debunked over and over again. I mean, it's just like an occurring theme that I think started with people like David Wilcock and Benjamin Fulford back then, 10 years ago, and never ended. And never ended. I mean, there is people like Benjamin Fulford who I've exposed very much in in volume 2 of my confessions, who is somebody who works for the Chinese intelligence, and who the only thing he does from morning to evening is to talk about a cabal that is about to be taken out. Now, how stupid can people be to believe again and again in a lie? I really sometimes this sorry, JeanClaude, it puzzles me. I'm a bit. I think that human stupidity, I mean, the reality of things is already fascinating. You don't need to enrich it with anything that is.
Right. Very good. Okay. So I just found here who you were talking about, Paul Lecourt. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll do my research on that. I'll send you an email if you have any specific book you want to recommend to me, and we'll go through that.
No, I think that you will have to really, apart from the suggested there in my book, the titles that eventually might be of interest, but his wide range of work, being in the French language, even myself, I at times had problems in acceding to it because my French is not that great. Yes, I can read it, but I'm like always struggling. So I'm sure that you will have access to a lot more work that he might have done. Also, he used to have involvement with various publication magazines and stuff. So, I mean, it's important, I think, that we evaluate our own background and traditions. Now, like I do in the case of at times, bringing out some Italian authors of importance that have been long forgotten. I think for you, you have a French background to also bring out that kind of. There is so much that the French mystery schools have done, and not all of it has been good. Let's, for example, focus on the Gnostic schools that were born out of Doniel, and then that was another Jesuit production, basically. That was basically in the sense that in the end, the guy who brought out this whole Gnostic phenomenon was somebody who wanted to become a Jesuit, but he was too much of a sexual pervert. He kept on masturbating in seminary, and then he ended up founding instead. Suddenly he said that he was dreaming about the Cathars, about being given a Gnostic succession, and believe it or not, that became the birth of modern Gnosticism and all the various Gnostic churches and the wandering bishops.
Wow. Fascinating. Sorry for the noise there. I was interrupted. There's somebody coming into the room.
Though after some of these phenomena, to make themselves more credible, have mixed themselves with other line of succession, like the line of Antiochia. I talked also about that in volume 3 of my confession.
Okay. Next question on the screen here. Janet Sharp. Does Trump have any Jesuit connections?
Of course, anybody that is in the establishment has a Jesuit connections. His daughter studied I talk about it actually in my book here. I denounce the Jesuit connections of Trump, saying though that as bad as they may seem, they're not as bad as the connection that people like Hillary Clinton have or John Podesta. These are, I mean, one thing is to study in a Jesuit school or having gone to a Jesuit gala or whatever.
The Met Gala, yeah.
A gala or some kind of fundraising or whatever. Right. Or the yearly gala that the Catholic Church organizes, where of course we have sold. So Hillary with Trump and that famous scene, and now everybody was shocked, blah blah. But the thing is that this is formalities that one attend. Another thing is the active participation, like what John Podesta does behind the scenes with the Jesuits and hanging out with Pier Giorgio Bassi, who is friend with who I myself saw coming in and out of Borgo Santo Spirito, and so these are, and then I show photos of these connections, and so I show photo of the connections with this Jesuit world that then will meet with the Russian world. I talk about these things though in volume also 6.66, so I don't want to spoil it, but I will definitely suggest for those who still want to go in volume 4 to go into page 197, sorry, so without the glasses, 197, basically to understand the connection between the Jesuits and Russia.
The SS and the Gestapo, yeah.
No, the actual connection with Catherine the Great of Russia, the fact that when the Jesuits were persecuted in the Vatican, they were protected for a period by the Russian Empress. Even if she was Orthodox, even if they were Catholic going into an Orthodox territory, the deal was that then for a period, the Jesuits will simply nominate a general who was Russian. And they did that until they went back into the Vatican. And so it's very important that I also expose this thing in my book.
Very good. Dusty Hayes is asking, Leo, do you speak about gematria in your books?
Not in these specific books.
Okay.
I talk about gematria in this book here.
Aha. Let me bring that up a little bit closer, Leo. What is it called? Invisible Master, Puppeteers, Healing, and Power. Okay.
If we want to discuss more that technical thing, that is where you're gonna find it, because of course gematria, notaricon, things that are to do with the Kabbalah or to do with these entities are something that has to be always discussed in the appropriate context. That's why it's discussed there. Somebody's asking me what I think of Marina Abramovic. Well, I mean, Marina Abramovic, we saw her last time we were together in the end page of the volume 5, no? When I showed Marina Abramovic and Jacob Rothschild in front of the Legion of Satan painting in a museum. They were pretty obvious what I think about Marina Abramovic. Well, here in Palm Springs, we have a museum where they had a work of Marina Abramovic exposed last year when I went before the start of the pandemic. And I was shocked simply because her installations, her art is always so dark and so satanic. And she tries to masquerade this, but you can't masquerade the fact that you are drawing your art from occult forces like she does.
Right.
Sorry, you can't have you can't have it. You can't pretend you are an angel when you are going to bed with the devil. I mean, it's not happening.
Right, and they're trying to make it fun and trendy with Hollywood, the spirit cooking.
Absolutely. I mean, the normalization, what came out during the elections, the spirit cooking and everything, and the connection with the Podestas, and of course, this connection is a connection that goes all the way down to the Vatican, as we have just discussed, the connection of the Podestas with the Vatican and with the Academy of the Illuminati and so on. I mean, but the fact that Marina Abramovic has also actively worked in the occult. That is something that at times sees people saying, oh, but she's just an artist. No, there is been part of the art world that has been actively working with the occult for many years. And she has been pretty open about it. So we don't need to make hypothetics about it. No?
Very good. Ed is asking if John Dee was the introduction to the British Empire to this whole world of pedophilia and child sacrifice and all that. Was he kind of like the instrument?
No, I will not go so. I mean, they were like swapping wives. That was already a big deal back then, and it ended up the friendship between John Dee and Kelly. I will say that it's much more profound what happened with the opening of those connections with the SEALs to welcome in this world those entities and actively use them to protect, like in the case of the Spanish Armada, the British coast. I mean, here we're talking about basically making a pact with the devil in a way. Once you start working with the occult at such levels, with the Sigillum Dei, they wanted to basically interconnect with the gods and have as a result a constant victory. And that can happen, but then what do you have to offer them? So then the guy says, is that when they started to? No, it started so long ago in the history of mankind that we have to go back to Atlantis. I think if we want to start talking about human sacrifice, unfortunately, we have seen it during the course of humanity happening in South America, various cultures over and over again. It's not a new thing. But you see, the fact that it was present in South America, and South America kept really a lot of things from the original Atlantis culture. Should make us think, how did things go really wrong in this Atlantis situation? And was human sacrifice part of it? Because we all know that Atlantis in the end dysfunctioned because of an abuse of these powers.
Yeah,
and of this technology. Because it's the technology of God in a way. You are playing with things you shouldn't be playing with when you are playing with the angels or the demons.
Right. Where do you tie in? And the next question here was about Nostradamus. I think it just jumped off my screen, but someone was asking you what you thought of him and how some of these prophecies tied in both with what the Illuminati are talking about in terms of the end time scenario and perhaps what more traditional Catholics might think about it. How do you see that tying in?
Well, I think that his career method and everything came also from a Jewish background, which is quite obvious. I don't really connect it too much to the Catholic world. Actually, something that he would have probably had to keep very secret. The Catholic world wanted itself their own exclusivity on certain subjects like that. That's why they used to persecute people for black magic, and that's why the whole prophecies of Nostradamus were written in a certain way, not to be too clear and not to be too obvious, and not to also include things that the church might find disrespectful and dangerous. So you could always interpret them in a different way. Because Nostradamus prophesied a lot of things, including the arrival of Napoleon in the Vatican. That was itself a shocking moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Nostradamus, how it ties in with the Jewish world, is because there is a link there with the word. That it's a word that we shouldn't be normal people having anything to do with, and that people should follow in the most traditional way with faith and reverence. Sometimes, and Kabbalah and alchemy became the attraction even for Jews who were baptized, like Nostradamus, okay? Because when you are, even myself, I have Ashkenazi Jewish blood. I might be more inclined into studying certain things than other people. That's why I went maybe for a period of my life in the study of Kabbalah. I tell you, in the study of Notarikon, in the study of Gematria, of the meaning. But for me, it was a passage in my life, like, like going to school and learning, learning a language, learning mathematics, anything that comes, geometry. Right. And so Nostradamus was, though, an unusual Jew, because he was somebody who had converted to Christianity, so he wasn't relying to the traditional Jewish teachings. He was a master astrologer, and we know how important is astrology. But then there is also his connection with Queen Catherine de' Medici, and that's where we should all be a little bit like, bing! Because when we were going to go in volume 6.66 at our next appointment, we will discover that Catherine de' Medici was a fundamental figure in the birth of the first ever Black Mass. So what was Nostradamus' involvement with the Black Mass? Because you see, the Black Mass that the Catherine de' Medici put together was a reversal of the Catholic Mass. It wasn't the satanic Mass that we have since then, assuming more and more dark and occult connotations. It was mostly by becoming blasphemers of a rite that was inverse, that was made satanic, but it was still interpreted by a Catholic priest. It wasn't a satanic high priest. It wasn't a Satanist. The real mockery of God had to go through a man of the church who will sacrifice himself a child. So yes, I have my doubts on the role of Nostradamus in what happened, because we know that he was the favorite of Catherine de' Medici, and we know that Catherine de' Medici went to this fixation that she was in such a bad place that she had to resort to sacrifice a child, and she had to do a black mass. I mean, it's like you are really, and this to maybe save your own child or to save your own country or your own position.
Right.
So I would like to talk about it also the next time, about the subject, in particular Catherine de' Medici.
Okay, very good. I'll take notes. The next question on the screen. Next. Okay. We have 5 minutes left. So let me do this one here first. So there was two parts to his question or her question. One, are you psychic? And two, what are your predictions for 2021? And let's distinguish here what the Illuminati want and how you cover that in book 6.66 and what you think might be happening with the Biden pretendency here in the US.
I don't have thoughts of myself. You see, I'm somebody who follows the map that was laid down. Okay? And I think that in a way, yes, you can have the tendency sometimes, to want to, but you should always stay with your feet on the ground. So why did my predictions occur? Simply because if you are knowledgeable enough and you have been part of this world of secret societies all your life, you know where they're heading. It's a bit like, let me tell you, it's a bit like you have the Boy Scouts. I don't know, the Boy Scouts these days end up very badly with a bunch of court cases. We won't go there. But the Boy Scouts teach a series of signs, okay? That we know the founder of the Boy Scouts was himself connected to Freemasonry, Baden-Powell was himself. No, but what is constructed is like, I'm giving you some signs and you have to follow them knowing what they mean. No? So these secret societies have left their signs and their prophetic messages all over our buildings, all over their books, all over their maps of, and once you interpret them, once you have a clear idea, and once you know where the forces are pushing. Sorry, I couldn't see that.
Oh, let me start the Cathedral. You were talking about the
Fulcanelli, of course, and we discussed that in the past also when we discussed Fulcanelli. But it's also the fact that we then, okay, Cagliostro could, the Count Cagliostro was very popular. A lot of people say this guy's a psychic, he's a divine. Of course, psychic. Of course, you are particularly sensitive, but you're not necessarily, if you want to accede to the future through entities, then you will always have to rely on information that might be manipulative and might be deliberately given to you to do an error that might cost your life, cost the life of others and stuff. So you have to be very careful if you start dealing with divination in that way. And then you have, of course, scrying. Then who are you letting in when you're doing this scrying? Who are you letting in when you are watching into a mirror? A mirror is in itself a symbol of magic power that shouldn't be open just like this, that connects with another dimension. Or the water that is being used to reflect, that, like Cagliostro used to watch in. You can do it if your mind is well prepared, empty, you have a very serious discipline, you might be able to do it. But the thing is that the constant threat of a demonic incursion is always there. So you better not do it. And instead, you might instead relate it to your feeling about the energies that are at force, and you make the necessary calculations.
Right.
Because you know that 1 + 1 is 2, and it's never going to be 4. It's never going to be 5. So you have when you want to view the future, you have to view it from beyond this limited lifespan of a human being. You have to. It's a little bit like the alchemist portrayed in that image that goes through space and time continuum, watching in that famous image. I don't remember exactly which one, but I'm sure that was often cited by Jung. And so once we know that we have a perception and we have an awareness of things that are around us, definitely you know that if I kick this ball, it's going to hit that wall or it's going to hit that window, because you know where the direction of the ball is going. You know the power, how powerful was kicked that ball. So, I mean, I think that is also about calculating these forces at work. And then you have to also calculate your own role and your own position while these forces are manifesting. Because I said that in 2020 there will be a virus that will lock us all up. In volume 2 of my Confessions, that was written clear as the day, no? Okay, so now people go there and say, but how did he? Because God was good enough to let me read certain books, belong to certain groups of people, where I heard certain things, maybe in a very reserved circumstance, where there was representatives of this or this other faith, or knighthoods, or Freemasonry, and then I became convinced that 2020 was that turning point.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't, and then you have to understand, you have to have at least more than one evidence that is going to be that way. Otherwise, you're going to fail.
Right.
So I've been yes, rather prophetic, but I guess that it's about it's not only the intuition. It's about calculating where this energy is conducing all of us, and knowing where this energy hits, how it hits, the intensity it hits. It emanates. Every institution emanates some egregor. The thought form itself generates a magnetic field. It moves the matter, and then you calculate it like a scientist. I know this sounds a bit bizarre.
No. This channel is all about woo-woo. I'm following you.
I'm following you. Some people might think, who is this guy? Mad scientist? No, I think that in my life, from when I was born, my intention was to prove certain things that are still unprovable to modern science. And I hope that at the end of my life, I will realize that those things that I have projected, and that I hope they will materialize.
Very good. Well, folks, again, this was part 2 of our book review with Leo Zagami. Of course, the title of this series is Confessions of an Illuminati. And here we have part 3 coming up now. I've just reposted it here tonight. So on April 5th, so Monday, April 5th at 8 p.m. Set your clocks for that one. We will have the third part of this book review. Of course, now on the screen as well is Leo's PayPal. So if you want to donate to him and keep him going in his research and in his endeavors to educate the public, please do so with this PayPal.
We try. Thanks to people like you who give kindly the spaces, we're still capable of doing that because unfortunately the censorship these days is part of the mechanism that is starting to go on the defense. I think that in 2020, amongst other things, they are going into the defense. So everything that I have basically written in 2019, a book I published on the winter, the winter solstice of 2019, was probably the last moment in which the Western world had a breath of normality. But it was for me already a moment in which I was saying, no, you should be warned that it's going to this direction. Get your act together. Do people listen to me, JeanClaude? Unfortunately, they don't. And that's why I keep on writing books, and politicians keep on being politicians, and religious people keep being religious people, carrying the flock. But once the next 9 years are going to manifest, that's when these compartmentalized sections of our current reality, politics, religion institutions, military, the law, everything is very compartmentalized. But the moment in which you will find yourself facing the end times, well, then we will go back to the good old school mix of all these categories in one being. Well, in that case, I'm going to be laughing at the level of stupidity of the formation in the modern universities, in the modern colleges, because they have not been prepared for what is about to happen.
Right.
They are too compartmentalized in their own section. They can only currently see this.
Mm-hmm.
When we need the genius of Leonardo da Vinci to have a new, like I said here, a new Renaissance 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to focus on. If we want to save humanity, we will need not the Greta Thunberg lies, which I've denounced in volume 4 of my confessions. We need the renaissance of people that are risking everything and saying, no, you are pushing it too further. And if you continue like this, in 10 years from now, the human race will inevitably going to the path of self-destruction when you are mixing with the machine, transhumanism, and the cyber Satan takeover we will be discussing the next time. Thank you.
Very good. So Walt says, thank you, Leo and JC, for the most interesting show. Pamela, thank you, Leo and JC. Polly P, thank you. Wow. William says, wow, thank you, Leo and Jean-Claude. Crypto Werewolf says, bring Leo back each month, JC. He's a great guest. I'd love to, guys, but Leo is very busy. If you want him to come back, make sure you tip in his PayPal tip jar. He's got a lot of work to do. And of course, he's also suffering under this economic warfare against truth tellers. So please do be generous to Leo, and hopefully we can find some little time to bring him back. But for sure now, we are for sure scheduled for this next episode here again on Monday, April 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And in the meantime, you can follow his work at leozagami.com and also on his YouTube channel, which for now is not deleted. The Leo Zagami Show is the next one over. And of course, you can find his books in the description box below. So Leo, thank you so much. Grazie. Thank you for being here this evening, and we'll see you soon. I'm JeanClaude BeyondMystic. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Au revoir.
God bless.